Welcome to episode 9 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by medievalists.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
I'm Kelly DeVries. I am the professor of history at Loyola University, Maryland. I'm sorry about that. Pausing a little bit because I was trying to think what I was going to be drinking tonight. I mean, we're doing Attila. What do we drink? Other than blood, what do we drink? What's in front of you, man?
A magnificent Hunnish gin. There is such a thing, surely. I mean, there must be a Hunnish gin, maybe.
Attila.
I'm not quite sure. Some sort of mead, probably.
Attila died after a night of partying for his some number marriage, and died in the middle of the night, or as the Book of Lists used to say, died in action. So he had to be drunk on something, and I'm just thinking it's probably fermented somewhat. Something, I don't know. Mare's milk.
I would think so.
Fermented mare's milk, is that? I'm trying to think. Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna go, I hope that's.
No, I hope. Yeah, that would. I'm thinking. I'm throwing up a bit just even thinking about it right now.
I mean, I say that confessing I've never had that.
No.
So I shouldn't judge what I have not had.
But I'll join you. We'll make up a Hungarian gin.
I just feel like it's a gin and tonic kind of day.
Hungarian gin and bar.
Bring us the gin.
No, I'm not gonna have
Ginny gin.
It's not certainly gonna be vodka right now. I'm protesting the Russians. Go Ukraine. I'm Team Ukraine.
That's right. Team Ukraine. Hashtag Team Ukraine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as Kelly just said, after the last couple episodes where we talked about some pretty famous late medieval battles, Crécy in 1346 and Nicopolis in 1396, we're heading back some 9 centuries to talk about the man, the myth, and indeed the legend, Attila the Hun.
I don't know about how much history he existed.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about that. This is one of the things with Attila is, we see Attila the Hun in the negative, like kind of, I mean, negatively, but also in the negative. But let's just kind of start just generally. When I say, or anybody says to you, Attila the Hun, what do you think?
So you've heard this story, but those who are listening will not have. A few years back, I was involved in an international conference that was run by the Italian military, and we were up at Trieste. It was our location, and one of the tours they took us out to was this tour that began in the morning, went all throughout, and we stopped in the middle outside of Aquileia at would have been a reconstructed or reimagined Roman winery, and we set out for one of these lunches. Now, marathon lunches in Italian is probably redundant. This was 6 courses with 6 different wines. And we're sitting outside of Aquileia. Now, Aquileia is one of the cities that Attila rolls over. It was the largest city in that region for Rome, had been since the early empire. And we'd had emperors die there and everything. I'm looking at my menu. I'm full. I'm probably buzzed enough that I just tell the table, okay, well, tell our hosts I'm walking into Aquileia, which was about 1.5 miles in. And I took off and started walking, and I got in, and I was amazed. I did not realize the size of the place. It is just huge. They've done a wonderful job of creating a kind of an archaeological park, because nobody's really gone back and ever lived there. It was pretty well taken down by Attila. And in fact, I was able to go into the church, which has the floor that was there when Attila was. I was able to go through some buildings, a museum, and then the bus showed up with the rest of the people. So I did the right thing in going there, and I've gone back since. But it was interesting because I came back, the students at first class, as soon as I came back, and I was showing them the slides and all these ruins and everything, and telling them the story about Attila. And one of my students just raised his hand and said, "What would you feel?" And I said, what do you mean? Yeah. What would you feel if you were in Aquileia and you knew that Attila and his army was coming at you.
Yeah. And Aquileia, just, so people are clear, this is right at the head of the Adriatic. Right at the head of the Adriatic. So, not that far from Venice, really. And it is an absolutely enormous site, as Kelly's saying. So how did you answer that, man? What would you think if Attila, you got the word Attila's coming down the road?
And I mean, I think it's apropos right now with what's going on in the Ukraine, because the idea of what do you do is being shown to us every night, and that, I mean, almost everybody says the same thing, and this is what I told them. I said, you'd be scared shitless. That'd be it. You'd be scared. If you're rich, you're already gone. So all the rich people can get out. They can go to their relatives in Rome. They can go to the relatives in Ravenna at this point. But the poor people, they can't. They've got to hope that Attila's army comes in and will brutalize them, but not kill them. And that appears what it was. And another student asked me, well, why would Attila do this? I said, because he could pay for his army for the next couple of years. All the wealth that was in Aquileia was now his. Even the rich people couldn't be taking out mounds and mounds of wealth. And it was an extremely wealthy city, because it was, as you said, it's the harbor for that area. Now it's all silted up, but you can actually see where the old harbor was. It was huge, and it was wealthy. It was also the gateway to going into Hungary from Italy, and the gateway to going into the Balkans. So Aquileia was a very important city. It's now essentially what Venice does, but the size of it just befuddled me. I couldn't imagine how large it was. I mean, I know we think about this time, we say, oh, well, they couldn't be very big. It's not like a modern situation or anything like that. No, it was. And even more, it was for the people inside, as they knew that Attila's coming on them, because they were frightened. The man's name alone frightened them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I said the man, the myth, the legend. I mean, it was for them too, really, at that moment. This is somebody who's far greater than a person at that point, given his reputation and what was happening.
And the men he could command.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary force. Now, and part of the reason we have this amazing site at Aquileia, of course, is because of what he did. I mean, he leveled the place. And anything that wasn't nailed down, he basically took with him. But one effect of that is that it got kind of left.
Yeah.
And then when it silts up, it's no longer useful as a harbor either. So there's no reason to rebuild there, which makes it kind of an amazing time capsule.
It is, and one of those great time capsules like that. Pompeii, of course, is the one we always think of in this sort of thing, a natural disaster. But this is a man-made disaster. It still was as effective in destroying that city as the volcano was in knocking off Pompeii. Probably cost the same number. The problem, of course, is that's only archaeological record. We actually don't even know, except for a brief mention here and there, that Attila actually attacked. There is nothing on him. Huns did not write. Steppe peoples were not. That was not their culture. That was not their tradition. And so we don't have that.
Right. And so this is one of the things I alluded to earlier that we have to talk about when we talk about Attila. When I say can we have him in the negative, I mean like in a sort of photography sense. We don't have the voice of Attila. We don't have sort of Hunnish apologists or chroniclers or anything like, well, here's what we were really up to. Here's what we thought about the situation. We don't get any of that. All we have is Attila from the viewpoint of people who are scared and running from Attila. And that gives us an issue of survivor bias, right? Of how we view the situation when we have that. So how do we like, how do we start to grapple with that
Well, I think
idea?
we first have to forget this kind of idea that the winners write all the history, because in this case, the winners aren't writing the history. I mean, they'll ultimately come out. We've got an amazing ending. Well, two amazing endings. One we've already alluded to with Attila dying in the night after a wedding with maybe his eighth wife or something. But so we've got that. But otherwise, it's all written by people who are losing to him. Even
Yeah.
the battle that we think about it when we think about Attila, the Catalonian Plains, is a loss for Attila. Um, it's still written because of the events that happened within a year after it. It seems almost as if Attila won. So the Romans are writing, but they're not the victors in this. So the story they give is one both of, well, we lost, and this guy was brutal, and that's how it goes recorded down in history. So there's really no middle ground here. We don't have Attila's voice. We also don't have the voice of some Roman historian thinking like we as academics think, oh yeah, let's gather all the sources together and put them down, and we're gonna find out who was saying what, get everything in writing. We don't know. We don't even have an idea when Attila rose to power. Um,
So it'd be very much like if all we had of the Vikings showing up in England was the accounts of the monks who get their stuff taken and get the monastery burned, right? If that's all we had, we would have a very different picture of Vikings than we do, because we have a lot more than that. We've got all the wonderful accounts of the Vikings, quote unquote, the Norse folks themselves. We know what they're doing. We just don't have that for
no,
the Huns. It's
no.
terribly, terribly frustrating as historians to try
Yeah,
and deal with.
and it's but it is interesting when you try to picture these or put it together out of the Roman accounts. For example, this is really the first time that they're hitting a body of troops. The Huns are not we're not specific to Attila here. I mean, this is before, but this is the first time they're hitting a body of warriors who don't actually charge into them. The Romans are very disciplined, very straightforward army, even in this time where Vegetius is telling them they're all crap because they're not as good as their forefathers were. They still were, able to go on a battlefield in order and sit there and wait until somebody attacked them and then fight them off and win, and that's that. The horse archers are sitting
Yeah.
out there. Well, that brings up another funny story. I was once doing a show for History Channel on barbarian weaponry, barbarian weaponry. And
uh,
this poor reenactor, I say poor reenactor because he was actually pretty good at trying to do all this and add a horse and everything. And he was saying, oh, well, Attila, the Huns had stirrups. I'm watching this thing. I've got it, and it's going to be showing the next night. And they sent it to me, and he's got the great Peter Heathers just before me, and then I come on, and both of us say, "Yeah, the Huns don't have stirrups. They don't." Then this guy comes on and says, "Oh, they have stirrups, and not only that, they could ride around, slipping around their horse, and shoot from underneath the belly of the beast." And I said, well, hold on, stop. I wrote the producer and said, first of all, if you have stirrups, you can't do that. They're not, they're not moving in the saddle. But second of all, the Romans had nothing to hit them. Why would these guys risk their most important bow when they tried to slide around underneath the horse, which wasn't a horse, it was a pony. I mean, it had very little clearance. So this very amazing recurved bow that would have cost them a lot. And they're going to risk that by sliding under to shoot at the Romans who had nothing to hit them. And that was,
and those arrows won't be that effective. It's we probably shouldn't say. I've heard this story, but we probably shouldn't say who exactly that reenactor was.
No.
That reenactment expert.
It was Attila from the grave, no doubt. It's just a funny comment.
My guys could do this. It would look good in the movie.
Look really good in the movie.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that
no.
They did
in fact, it's the Romans, and the Romans were clearly didn't know what to do. I mean, there was one or two accounts that envisioned that all they thought about was the Hun and the horse were together. There was even one or two that said, kind of looked like they're together. They live together, sleep together, and and everything along those lines. And we get an idea that the Romans, they were kind of befuddled by them all.
Yeah, well, I mean, they absolutely were, and we even see that when we get these actual accounts of close contact. So for example, Priscus, when he actually
Mm.
meets Attila the Hun, which and we
Yeah, this
have
is
this.
amazing.
Um, it's such an amazing story. Now again, we are kind of like, all right, we don't have this from the other side, so we're taking on faith that in fact Priscus, as an envoy of the Eastern Roman Empire, um, actually did meet with Attila at his encampment, and that what he's telling us is in fact, reliably what
Yeah,
he saw.
yeah,
So we got a bunch of asterisks here. Now that said, we don't necessarily have any reason to
no, no.
disbelieve Priscus's account. It looks like it's legit, but we cannot 100% confirm it. But oh,
Yeah,
what
it
an
is an
account!
account. I mean, and
Uh,
and I think there's some credibility to be given because Priscus is not writing this. He's writing a description while he's scared to death because he's been sent by the Byzantines to Attila to say, "Oh, you know that tribute we were paying? Yeah, we're not going to anymore. Yeah,
we're not going to do that.
don't kill the messenger." But here's what Priscus
Yeah.
writes. So he says, "Attila was a man born into the world to shake the nations, the scourge of all lands, who in some way terrified all mankind by the dreadful rumors noised abroad concerning him. He was haughty in his walk, rolling his eyes hither and thither, so that the power of his proud spirit appeared in the movement of his body. He was indeed a lover of war, yet restrained in action, mighty in council, gracious to suppliants, and lenient to those who were once received into his protection. Short of stature, with a broad chest and a large head, his eyes were small, his beard thin and sprinkled with gray, and he had a flat nose and swarthy skin, showing evidence of his origin." Yeah,
Ooh.
I mean, it he goes in there. I think one of the things that Priscus is admitting, not just in his description of Attila, but also in the way he's writing it, as he says, who in some way he Attila in some way terrified all mankind by the dreadful rumors noised about abroad concerning him, and then he says, by the way, all those rumors are true. So
Yeah. Well, and there's this fun as he goes on to talk about actually having dinner
yeah,
with Attila.
yeah,
And you have these wonderful images of there's all these gold and silver goblets, he says, but Attila's is
it's
made of
made of
wood.
wood.
His is made of wood. His clothes were simple. The everything he had wasn't about this ostentatious stuff. And you can kind of get a sense of this sort of disconnect that Priscus is feeling,
Yeah,
and that this is clearly not how the emperor usually is eating and drinking. And this guy's the
yeah,
guy in charge.
yeah.
We're just eating. He's just eating from a wooden plank with meat. I'm like, what? It's clearly kind of jarring to him, which does potentially make it at least in the ballpark of being more
And
reality.
it gives us an
Uh,
idea that Attila understands politics and diplomacy as much as he understands everything else. Because I said Byzantine, of course, it isn't the Byzantine Empire yet; it's still the Eastern Roman Empire. But you can imagine a legate
right.
from the Eastern Roman Empire showed up with his finest silk clothes, and and
All
all the
this
other
nice
people
stuff.
around Attila are neatly dressed. I can just imagine he comes into this dinner party and he's there, he's dressed to the nines, and he looks around everybody else. He's got this kind of smile. Oh, my silk's better than their silk, and then Attila walks in with a wooden plate and simple clothing, and you go, cha-ching! That's the master there. That's the one who's going to
uh,
grant you life or death. You have just not
yeah.
impressed him.
And you bring up a point here we have to talk about with Attila as well, which is that we think about Attila the Hun and the Huns, but this is actually a coalition essentially that Attila has managed to put together. By the time he's showing up in the West after doing a lot in the East, Some pretty astonishing things in the East. I mean, this is a kind of multinational coalition that he's really kind of in charge of at this point. It's not a single entity, which also, as you said, there's politics involved here, right? That Attila has to be carefully orchestrating to keep all his people banded together.
Yeah, and while at the same time holding on to his own power, because he cannot have
Right.
an upstart suddenly say, I'm better than you, Attila, because you are getting that gray in your beer that Priscus talks
Right.
about. That's already happened to a certain extent. At least that, again, we don't have the evidence for this, but Attila co-ruled with his brother at the very beginning when they rise to power. We're not entirely certain. It seems to have been an uncle who was in charge of a small bit of the Hunnic peoples, and Attila and Bleda arose as kind of co-rulers. And then suddenly Bleda disappears. We don't have any other clue. And when I mention it, the students all are that it's devious. I'm saying, but what if, they're just out in the woods someday hunting and Bleda falls off his horse and dies? Nice.
No, he got off, Kelly.
You think we're looking at an arrow in
I'm
the
with your
head?
students on this one. I'm with your students on this one. The silence speaks very loudly.
Speak very loudly. Of course, again, we don't have the Huns. We're getting this from bits and pieces that are put together.
Yeah.
And Priscus, in fact, his account survives as a fragment. We don't have anything on this entire legacy. He tells us the reason. He actually has a little bit on the travel, but because they have got to go to Hungary, where the Attila's camp is.
Right. Yeah, and those fragments, they're secondhand, right? They're in Procopius and Jordanus.
I think I'm not entirely certain, because this one is where we get it is an edition of what is called fragmentized, and so I think it does come out of that. One of the more one of the historians later on says, "Oh, this is such a great thing. I've got to put it in." Unfortunately, it's still there. We don't know Priscus otherwise, so. The only thing we know is this. So, it's a period where we're not even getting the bureaucratic records the Roman Empire must certainly have kept. They're all gone by the time, but probably even by the time that Jordanes or Procopius or whoever has included this is writing. So, but we have to piece together history. There we have Attila and Bleda. They're co-running this. And you're absolutely right. It's an alliance of everybody. Everybody I think it's funny that the Romans know the names of all these guys. They know the names. They're very good about it. And they will list them. But we as modern historians tend to chuck them all together. The coalition under Attila has got to be the Huns. But if you're looking for a leader to follow, and let's say you're a Goth, another probably made up, designation. And you can suddenly say, geez, I'm going to go, Attila pays better. Suddenly you become a Hun.
Yeah. Well, there's actually this, one of the things I wish I knew how to figure this out. So that the actual name Attila is Gothic. This is not a word. People have tried to sort of create ways that etymologically this could be a Hunnish word. I haven't seen a single one that holds much water. The thing that it quite directly is Gothic, not Hunnish. It's Gothic, and it means little father. Ata is an Illa. Attila is little father, and that's so was that really his name, or was this something that the Goths in his army called him, and it sort of stuck? He liked it. Just why the hell do we have a Gothic name for this Hunnish leader? And there's no question he's Hunnish. It's not
I don't think there's any question at all on that.
Yeah, there's no question on that. So why he has a Gothic name has always befuddled me. And I think it's befuddled everybody. Where'd this come from? But it's one of these crazy cool mysteries that if we had their accounts, we might know why that is. That he assumed this epithet. or something. But he's actually, his name is Gothic
Well,
of
I
all
mean,
things, which is
maybe
just
the
all
little
kinds of
part
fun.
may be easier to understand. I mean, if we go with Priscus on being short of stature, it might just simply be,
Yeah,
short, little father, because the father, of course,
yeah,
is, could designate him just simply being the ruler, like the Pope
right,
sort of thing. Um, yeah,
right,
but I mean, this is one of the many mysteries we know of this guy who comes
yeah,
into power in the mid fifth century, and now the Huns are already into the empire, as we know it. They are, that we have records of them appearing as mercenaries fighting for the Romans even before the Battle of Adrianople in 378, where we get the split afterwards of East and West Empire. So, and we know also in the very beginning when Attila rises, he stays in the East. I mean, and he stays in the East. We get exactly the term. We get exactly that from Priscus again, because he's getting tribute. He won't attack.
yeah,
He attacks all the smaller places and everything like this. He doesn't go after the big cities, but because the big cities require the food to be produced outside, they can't have armies running up and down around their farms, and so they make peace. They send a huge amount of tribute. That changes all of a sudden with one of the most bizarre stories of all, I think, of all history. I mean, Attila is one
and
bizarre story after another, but this one is.
it is one bizarre story. And just right before we get there, I just want to make sure, kind of like getting everybody's head around this. We're really talking about, like, the Huns are north of the
Yeah,
Danube. It's really the Danube line that is kind of historically at this point, um, that, thou shalt not cross, right? That crossing the Danube means you're really entering Rome. Now, there'd been some back and forth, but more or less picture the Danube in your head as like a
yeah.
dividing line, if you will, for what Kelly's about to
Well, and
talk
also, I
about.
mean, the reason, I mean, it's a very simple reason as to why Hungary is their location, not just because they go in and say, "Oh, it's already named Hun.
It's named for
You should
us.
settle here." No, it was the Central European plain, and they needed pasture
Yeah,
land,
the
and
steppe.
you can't. I mean, Switzerland's nice and beautiful, but unless you got horses that can stand on the side of hills, you can't really be putting them anywhere. So Attila is camped there, and then he rides down and raids, and that's the way he does things. And that's the way it
Yeah,
had been done for a long time. If you look at the maps, the Danube is the border. The Goths had been led across, and they had invaded later on. So Attila is just part of the many groups that have settled on the other side. Now the Huns themselves have come out of the steppes, so they've definitely been pushing tribes out of their way in order to settle in Hungary. But yeah, I mean, Priscus is in Hungary when he's making that account we just read. But this is exactly the case. I mean, so there's tribute, and Priscus' account says is the Eastern Romans wanted to cut that off. By the way, that only lasted a year until it went in and reminded them why they have to pay a tribute. But
you
yeah,
you need to pay. Oh yeah, we are.
but
Okay, we are.
I mean, now we go to dark on the Attila go to the second stage for one thing, because this is happening in Ravenna. The emperor in Ravenna is a man by the name of Valentinian III. By all accounts, a weasel. But he's Emperor Weasel, and not the only one that Rome has had. Let's face it, even in this post Adrianople period. But Valentinian is the weasel, and he has a sister named Honoria, and sisters to emperors were good for only one thing, and that was to marry him off to somebody who's going to give you votes or in the Senate, or going to give you some sort of
Yeah,
status. And Anoria is kind of her own woman, it appears. She would have been just a teen at this time, and she falls in love with what we hear is a servant. So, oops, the class is gone. May even have been a slave, who knows? And she evidently gets pregnant. At least that's the story. Valentinian finds out, and he does what every good brother protecting his sister does. He kills her lover and the father of her baby, and then says, "Yeah, no, I think I'm going to give you to this old geezer over here, who I need his votes, and I need his money and other things like that." And she instead, so here's the rebellion of the day. She sends a letter to Attila saying, let's get married. I'm kind of single now. Let's get married. And by the way, I'll give you half the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire.
The year is
Yeah.
450. The year is 450. She's not a teenager.
Okay. All right.
I will say. Yeah. She was born around 418. So she's been around a while. But yeah, this come and help me out, and I'll marry you. She's actually the elder sister of the
okay. All right. So you got a bit more on the story. I mean, it's just hilarious if you think about it.
Oh, it's crazy. You know, that I'm gonna give you half of my little brother's empire as dowry.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do that.
You want anybody out there taking notes on rebellion? This may be the first one on your list. This, marry the enemy of everybody and offer him half of your brother's kingdom, and that'll be it.
The story gets even crazier, right? Because she writes him, and Valentinian finds out. He finds this out, and it's their mother that has to convince Valentinian not just to kill his sister for doing this, and instead exile her. And then he also has to write Attila to say that wasn't a legitimate proposal.
No, I know.
She was not speaking with the authority of me as emperor. It's just hilarious. I mean, obviously, it's not hilarious, and that a lot of people.
No, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that dark humor that we see far too often in this type of thing. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I again, this is one where we wish we had Attila's writing a diary down there. I just got this kind of interesting letter, and
you're never going to believe
whether he got the second letter from Valentinian. He didn't really care. He had changed his strategy at that moment. And he now turned away from the east and went towards the west. And he entered.
Yeah. Now he's got an excuse. Now he's got an excuse. This woman has been wronged. This was a legitimate proposal. And that half that empire is mine now.
Yeah.
I got to just make this happen.
And we don't think
he comes.
We don't think Anoria ever met him. Didn't know anything about him. I mean, this is, if you're going to irritate your brother who's just killed your lover, this is kind of the way to do it. And but Attila takes it on and says, okay, well, the Eastern Empire's kind of been bled dry for a couple of seasons. Let's head off to the west. And sure enough, he does. And boom, he literally just crosses over the Danube, over the Rhine. His army is quite large at this point. In fact, we hear that he takes Paris after this, and then he goes and besieges Orleans. So he's not only changing his strategy by entering the Western Empire, he's also changing his strategy by actually going after walled cities. And so he must have collected some sort of siege engineer staff or whatever at this point in time.
And it really is a kind of who's who of cities. As he's rolling into Gaul, it's Strasbourg and Mainz and Cologne and Tournai and Amiens, Paris, Orleans, Reims. He's hitting all kinds of stuff, and then
well, he gets stopped at Orleans. It's kind of an interesting situation. The Orleanais has actually uncovered a part of this first wall. It's quite much lower, but you can see it if you're going to Orleans in France. Go take a look on the side of the cathedral, and they have way down below this the foundations of this wall. It's quite amazing to see and how thick it was. So he gets stopped at Orleans, but what Attila hasn't really thought out. I think he's just going in. He's a raider at this point. As long as he doesn't get anybody to rise up against him and fight him, he's not really worried about anything. And so he's just going ripping through these cities, taking everything that is tied down, taking slaves, taking everybody he can. And Orleans stops it. But what he hasn't counted on is Orleans. If you look at the map, it's central France. Paris and those other areas are to the north, and really there hadn't been much activity there. The Franks were in control, but the Franks were um, they weren't as strong as they could be. But now he's getting down to the Visigothic territory in southern France, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's when the chief general of Valentinian's army, a man by the name of Aetius, who's interesting in his own right. Aetius then makes an alliance with the Visigoths that together they will go after Attila and stop him. They don't. I think there's probably some anticipation they're going to have to stop him outside of Orleans, but Attila has turned away from Orleans, unable to get it. Probably going back to winter again in Hungary, something along those lines. But anyway, the alliance is made between Aetius and and the Visigoths. So now we've got an allied army to face Attila's great numbers.
Yeah, and we should say here too, when it comes, Kelly mentioned before, the destruction there in Italy that we can see at Aquileia. There's not a lot of destruction that we can see from this supposed campaign that goes all throughout France and everything. It's a kind of odd, somewhat disconcerting thing that we're told that like these cities are sacked, and we can't find any archaeological evidence that they were sacked. So were they? Um, did he just kind of rush through, grab what he could, and moved on without sacking it? Did he pass them by? What really happened at that point? We don't
No,
have a clear
no,
sense of it.
and I mean this is the same. It's very hard to follow Attila on kind of even a month by month basis. And we know this campaign is going on. We do know that he gets to Orleans, but yeah, you're right. I mean Paris. On top of it all, these are large Roman cities in Western context, not in Eastern context. So anything that is like Thessaloniki or of course Constantinople at this point, they're really large. When we're talking about Paris, we're talking about the Ile de la Cité is it. And we're talking about Mainz. The Roman area of Mainz was really quite large. I've been there and you can actually see it. But the area that was fortified and would have been underneath, would have been the area attacked by Attila wasn't very big at all. And I don't even know that Tournai at this point was fortified. It may have been fortified with an earthen fortification. So we don't have any of the archaeological evidence. Somebody really looks for it, but nobody could find it. Even if you, I mean, the evidence of sacking is usually on a major area, and it's found because they find ruins that are burned and things, sort of things.
Yeah.
And we don't have any ruins even from that period of time. There are some in Paris, but they don't show anything that was done then. So it may be that's an exaggeration. Of course, most of this campaign is now coming from Jordanes, who is writing a couple of centuries later, and is Gothic, but in Roman. By this time I'm a very Romanized Goth, and so
Right.
I mean he begins his account talking about Attila is related to Mars, and you kind of think Mars is on the other side of the Danube. That's the Roman period.
Yeah,
I
I
wonder what.
mean,
Yeah,
tomato,
exactly
tomato.
right. And
It,
then there's another account that has Attila's, a rescuee from a refugee from Troy. Evidently, refugees from Troy were very successful at founding.
they were everywhere.
Yeah,
I
which
mean,
means they all got.
Aeneas, Brutus, they're all over the place. It, but it again though speaks to this problem we have of Attila, of a lack of sources. The sources we have tend to be very late, and we're in the position of trying to determine how did these events really happen the way we're being told. I mean, is there a political aim to saying that they happened? What kind of bias are we grappling with? And if we begin to think, well, maybe we shouldn't trust this source, we're quickly left with, well, then we know nothing.
Yeah.
Then we got nothing left because that's the only source we got. So that's not to say that we don't have to think about those things, but it's just something we come into, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about Stamford Bridge in a few episodes. This is a major issue we've got in grappling with these kind of things. Is sometimes we know that the source we have has problems, but it's the only source we've got. So how do we navigate that? And we'll talk about that more in a future
Yeah,
episode for sure.
absolutely. I mean, it's hard to complain. It's funny because you go and say, "Oh, nobody should trust Jordanes on this." And you go, "He's the only story. He's the only one in town.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot. In fact, okay, give you a perfect example. Where was the battle fought? The big battle when Aetius catches up. Aetius and the Visigoths and the Romans Visigoths catch up with Attila. Attila's trying to retreat back. Where did it happen?
So it's called the Battle of the Catalaunian
Right.
Plains, or Catalaunian Fields, excuse me. Or is called the Battle of Chalons,
Yes.
or the Battle of Troy. Or I mean, also, yeah, we don't know
No,
where the
we
hell it
don't
was.
really have any idea. In fact, Catalaunian Fields is
It's
really,
ish.
yeah, and
It's
that's
ish.
modern. And that's because
Yeah.
so I could almost say that this while I was, my career, it's a little longer than yours. You've still got a couple of decades ago. I'm going to be probably doing a swim into the marsh in a couple of decades. But the name has changed in my life. It was started out, I've got books that say the Battle of Poitiers, then books that say the Battle of Tours, then books that say the Battle of Chalon, then books that say Catalaunian Fields. So we haven't even located it. And it's one of these ones where somebody is going to, dig up something and go, I wonder what this is. And have like, I'm with Attila on it or something. And then we'll find a whole bunch of other things.
I'm with stupid.
Yeah.
No, it is tremendously crazy. This is a by all accounts a huge
Yeah.
fight.
Yeah.
It's an enormous fight. Now what effect it has is very much something that's debated in the historiography, because as Kelly was saying, Attila, that is, has already left Orleans. So it looks like he's already like headed home. He's got a lot of stuff. Looks like he can't push any further. So it looks like he's turned around and he's headed home. And that's when he gets hit by this army, and this big battle happens, as a result of which Attila heads home.
He does what he was doing anyway.
He does what he was doing anyway. So how much did this really change history, in the sense that, well, he was headed home anyway, is very much debated. Some people think no, this really was nevertheless a hugely important thing, because it sort of showed that the Romans, with the help of the Goths, in this case, it could stand up to Attila.
Yeah.
And this is a major thing psychologically. It's also been well argued, this is a kind of a big turning point in the idea that Roman tactics and Roman sort of warfare alone isn't going to work anymore. It's another instance of having to bring in these other groups. But other people are like, yeah, it didn't. It was kind of a pointless battle, because he just did what he was going to keep doing.
It is a pointless battle, of course, on the Roman side, but we'll get to that in just a moment. The interesting thing about Aetius, of course, we've had several generations now where we've got barbarians that are serving in the Roman military and vice versa. The Aetius has been a hostage in the Hun camp. It's likely he knew Attila, but he certainly, in his 6 or so years when he was living there as a teenager, had picked up on Hun strategy and Hun tactics, because of the way he lines his army up. It's not a legion on a field, which is what the traditional Roman would have been, because they're powerful. They need to be able to wield their weapons, and they need to be able to stand in a unity. He puts them on the top of a hill, and we get from Jordanes again. We've just poo-pooed the source, but it's the only story in town. Jordanes has, I think it's on the right flank, that or his right flank. So Attila's left, that the Visigoths are there, and the Visigoths got some archers. But if you think about it, Attila is still using the tactics of his people. They haven't been beaten, so he's got his horse archers. What happens if you put your army on the top of a hill is the horse archers are ineffective. And so I think Aetius must have understood a bit. He's now evolved himself, and he says, well, he evolved with his own knowledge. And so he literally puts the Roman and Visigoths on top of a hill, and that completely negates Attila's ability to use his horse archers, because they can't go close. The horses won't climb the hill with any reliability for them to shoot their bows, and they can't shoot them from below because they're at such an angle they don't do any good. So it's a smart tactic. And I believe Giordani's on this. It's a smart tactic. So Attila shows up, all these people. He has to line up. He sees that Aetius has taken the higher ground. Attila has two choices: to move on and let his rear guard be hurt by the raining from Aetius's army, and all of those wagons are filled with goods that he's taken from towns. Does he do that, or does he try to attack?
He tries to attack.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, he wouldn't have had any doubt not to, because he hadn't lost against an army. We don't know a large number of battles he fought, but he hadn't lost yet. So he's still, he is the Attila. He's still the one that, terrifying all mankind.
Now, at least according to story, he did. They did examine the entrails of a sacrifice.
Okay, that was the other reason.
And it said there was going to be disaster. Like, this isn't going to go well, but you're going to kill one of the enemy leaders. And so he's like, all right. As the day goes on, he's like, all right, well, let's give it a shot. And we'll do it sort of late in the day, because if it really does go bad, darkness will help cover our retreat. But we will have knocked out one of the enemy leaders, so it'll be worth it. Now, obviously, how reliable is that?
I think it's completely reliable. Writing prophecy long after the time.
Yeah, after the event.
They opened amazingly up there and said, "You know what? Trump is going to be president."
Amazingly enough, this is what happened: is that the Huns lost, but the other side lost one of its leaders. So it turns out that prophecy that, again, we have recorded quite a bit after the battle, said what happened in the battle.
Yeah,
but I'm sure it's reliable.
The Visigoths is killed, so it's true. I mean, one of the prophecies written way later than it was actually given is true. One of the leaders did die, and that will fracture the army afterwards. I mean, we'll talk about the retreat in just a moment. But Attila charges up the hill using his massive army, but using them off their horses. So they're fighting against going up a hill time and time again. And it does appear this is a long battle. It appears that Attila sees them, and they set battle the night before, and then encounter that battle, like you said, all the way to dark. And so it is a lot of fighting, and Attila doesn't break. That's one where you have to break your enemy, get him off that high ground, and he doesn't break him. Even the death of his Fredegonde,
it's Thor's
Theodoric. Yeah, Theodoric. Even the death of him is not going to not at least at that time, not disunifying the force up there. They're ready to go on. And in fact, when night falls, Attila's gone back. Everybody expects there's going to be a second day of fighting. The Romans stay on top. The Romans and Goths stay on top of the hill, and Attila and the Huns stay on the bottom in camps. They could see each other's camps very easily, but it isn't a second day.
Yeah. when light comes up, we're told that the field was piled high with bodies, and the Huns did not venture forth. And it's tens of thousands of men who've died, is what we're told. Again, we're always, or at least I am always like, okay, that's a big number. Let's maybe think about that. But that's what we're told, is tens of thousands die. Usually numbers is that I kind of tend to hear is
Yeah, I think
30,000.
that's usually a trope. 30,000 becomes far too
Yeah,
common, doesn't it?
yeah. But yeah, Attila does not come out. And now the Romans got to decide what they're
Hmm.
going to do.
Yeah, and of course, it may be. I perfectly believe that Attila is thinking, and charges haven't worked. Charges won't continue to work. There's not, and he's losing more than the Romans are, just simply because he does not. I mean, he does. I mean, Romans are still a heavily armored force at this period. The Goths maybe less, but the Huns are not. Their chief weapon, their chief units, the horse archers, have been taken away. So I think maybe Attila is thinking, all right, I won't take the battle to him. I'll let him come to me.
And if you want to do that, as we saw at the Battle of Crécy, it's good to have a field fortification of some kind. Crécy, it was the Wagenburg. What is the field fortification used by Attila here? How's he gonna prevent getting just kind of run over in his
Yeah,
camp?
I'm not sure that we have an account of that, and certainly if we knew a little bit more about it, they could be located. I mean, we can find Roman military camps, so we certainly would be able to find a fortified one if Attila had built on there. I it wouldn't have
Yeah,
been grand. It would have been some form of earthen wall, perhaps.
yeah, yeah. So digging the ditch and piling it up, and do it as quickly as you can. Meanwhile, Attila also makes a massive pile, supposedly the story goes, of horse saddles, so that if things go bad, he will throw himself on the funeral pyre of these horse saddles, so that no one would have the joy, no one would be able to have claim of having, hurt, wounded, much less killed or captured Attila the Hun, because he's Attila the Hun, and like Hercules, is going to go out on his own. So he supposedly builds this pyre, if you will, of horse saddles. So he's all ready, and then he's
Yeah,
besieged.
yeah, he is besieged. But actually, there's very little movement. He just doesn't move,
Yeah,
and Aetius doesn't come down. Once he sees he's there, he doesn't come down. So it's just, on the second day of battle, there really is no of battle. It's just kind of
yeah, bit of a
really a bit of
stalemate,
stalemate.
really.
And you could see these. I mean, if you think about this, because I always try to get back into minds and then try to leave them as quickly as, if it's like Attila's mind, I want it out pretty quickly. I'm not so
Yeah,
sure I want to sit in Aetius's mind either, but you get these kind of decisions being made, and you wonder what these great thinkers, these generals, are very experienced generals by this time, of course, and what they're thinking, and why. How can Attila provoke the Romans off the hill? How can the Romans, bring the Huns back up into them, where they feel like one or two more attacks, one or two more charges like
yeah.
that is going to certainly ruin the Hun army.
And in the middle of all this, the Visigoths have now learned that their king is dead. He died
Yeah,
on that first day. His son is there, Thorismund. I always got to keep them straight. Theodoric is the father. Thorismund is the son. Thorismund now knows his father is dead, and this now introduces a kind of political element to this. That Aetius has to think through very, very carefully. At least this is the story we get. That he knows, all right, Thorismund needs to go make a claim on his dad's title, and we want that, because we want these guys in our group. We don't want to be fighting, have to fight the Visigoths after this.
yeah,
We want to stay in good with the Visigoths, and also he's a little concerned, we're told, that if they kill the Huns entirely, if they wipe them out, the Visigoths won't have much reason to be allied with the Romans anymore. So there's an element in which we want to have this enemy. If we destroy this enemy, there's no reason for us to cooperate with each other. And also, if I don't get you back to claim the throne, odds are you're not going to be much help to me because you're going to be in the middle of a civil war for who's in charge of the Visigoths. So supposedly, Aetius convinces Thorismund to leave, to go home and secure your throne. I know you want to have vengeance against these Huns who killed your father and are literally right there, but don't go home.
And there could be a lot of reasons for this. I mean, military reasons. Just he doesn't want the Visigoths to go off hog wild and down and chase into Attila, which would give his troops all sorts of morale. If they defeated a smaller Gothic force. But you're absolutely right. Aetius has been accused in his story by, and in fact, he'll be accused by the emperor himself of keeping the Huns alive as an enemy, because he needs something. If he's going to rise, even if he's going to remain comfortable, he needs an enemy. And so all this has got to be in his mind. He's thinking, if I go back and report this, I can report a victory. If I report annihilation, then, I'm out to pasture, or I get, Valentinian is not going to appreciate this. And then, of course, there's a possibility Aetius himself is looking at the throne. Certainly another accusation that Valentinian is going to make against him.
Pulling a Caesar out there in
Gallic
land.
Well,
it
worked once.
So this, and thus ends the great battle of Catalaunian Plains. In as much as we can figure anything about it, that's I'd say pretty much it. But again, this was tens of thousands supposedly died. It's a horrific event.
It is. All battles are, and this is we can't forget that. But this is a kind of a minor issue, as you pointed out. We're not even sure that it does much. Now, the effect afterwards. So the Visigoths go home. He is made king of the Visigoths. Now the Roman, and they stay fairly peaceful. The Romans. They're still more worried about the Franks now in the north, because the Huns are leaving Gaul. And the Huns then go back into Hungary. Attila seems to have had no problem building another force, because it's not going to be a single year, and he'll be back attacking this time into Italy. The one that it hurts the most is Aetius. Poor Aetius, going back, the most competent general that has been around the Roman parts for a while, Western Roman parts for a while, and he goes down to report to Valentinian. Bad move. You should.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, it's a good move. It's what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what he's supposed to do. But yeah, he's assassinated in 453, just 2 years or some months shy of that, after the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains. And it really does seem to be that Valentinian is scared of him, right? I mean, this guy's got the he got the success behind him. He's this great, heroic victor in this battle, quote unquote victor.
And Valentinian is still a weasel. Let's not forget that. He's still a weasel. So he's got a hero out there who could say, I defeated the Huns, and boom, Valentinian's still a weasel.
Yeah. Well, I think it's 450. It's 454 that he takes him out and assassinates him, and does it in court. Which is pretty nasty business. Just to what, I've had it. Doesn't even try and make some kind of secret about this. Poor guy. I mean, not that things last that long for Attila either,
or for Valentinian. Valentinian is assassinated the next year by people who are said to have been generals of Aetius.
How dare you do that to our boy?
You're right about Attila doesn't last long. But this is where we come back to Aquileia, because this time, instead of going to Gaul, he comes down south into into Italy, and that's the time when Aquileia is rolled over, because, as I said, it's the gateway to Hungary, and that's what he's doing. So that gets back kind of the beginning of the story. Now, it doesn't end. Attila then doesn't go all the way to Rome. He doesn't sack everything. One of the things that every invader of Rome should have on their mind is that Rome has a lot of marshes around the middle of the land, and they all have these incredible diseases that nobody who is a steppe person who's been living in Hungary for a while is used to. And his army starts getting ill. He is making his way down. The Roman armies are all now at this point not ready to go against him. So he is going through Italy like a hot knife through butter, except for disease is now starting to slow him down. He's losing a lot of.
Right. And in 453, that's where I was getting the 453. That's the reason that number was in my head. In 453, he's getting married again.
Well, we've got one more story before, because we do know this. I mean, this is recorded several times. As Attila is going down, Pope Leo the Great.
Oh,
that's
Leo,
right. We got. I mean, this is a brave action. I've got Priscus meeting Attila at the very beginning. That's not necessarily brave. It's more like in the job description. But Leo could sit behind the walls in Rome. They've been sacked in 410, and so they're not as once were, but still he could sit down there and wait. But no, he comes up with one priest, meets Attila and tells him God doesn't want him to go into Italy.
Yep. The Bishop of Rome, Leo the First.
Yeah. You want a pope with, well, I can't say really. I'd probably go to hell if I say a pope with balls. But he was brave as can be. I mean, I've got to, and of course, I teach Catholic students, and I always say, there's two guys that I really think are brave. Two church leaders. One is St. Francis, who meets the Sultan, and the other one is Pope Leo, who goes to tell Attila. You imagine this old, and we think he's pretty old at the time, Leo, and he goes up to meet Attila and meets him and says, "Oh, by the way, God said no."
Yeah, I mean, he's probably 52 probably at this point. So and of course, things weren't all that easy back in the day. And there's like great there's great depictions of this in art. Not only have we a cool sort of description of this happening, but also these wonderful images of people trying to sort of imagine what this must have been like for, especially, obviously Christian painters and stuff, because Leo's so like, "Oh, we don't want you here. God doesn't want you here." And Attila turns around and leaves. Obviously as a cause and effect.
I mean, there are. I just want to dwell on the bravery, because Leo's got to be. I mean, this is the guy who will claim that he is the head of all of the churches, because Peter comes up with the Petrine doctrine as well. So he's the man who's really willing to make great strides, but none of that in the this DUI. No, not DUI manual for being a pope says, go to the biggest guy in the prison yard and slap him. But that's essentially what Leo's doing. And you can imagine he's sitting there with this guy who's, the terror still, the scourge of man, as scourge of all the lands,
Priscus says that part of the reason that this meeting spooks Attila is that it feels like superstitious, like that this is this religious guy who's full of fervor. I'm kind of freaked out by that, and he knows that Alaric, when he sacked Rome in 410 and died like right afterwards, and it looks like Leo said, like, points this out, and so Attila's like, "Oh yeah, that doesn't sound hot. Maybe I should not do that." And also, my people are all sick, and I've already got a bunch of crap from Aquileia. Maybe I should take off,
Exactly it.
and So he does go home, gets himself a blushing new bride, Ildiko.
You
I
did.
looked up her name.
Ildiko.
Ildiko. She's probably
Yeah.
Gothic. And at the wedding feast, we don't know exactly what happened. He chokes to death on blood.
Yeah.
It looks
Blood
like.
or vomit. Yeah.
And so what is this? Is this did he get it drunk and fall and get a nosebleed and then choke to death on the blood? Did he have some sort of hemorrhage?
Yeah.
We don't know.
I mean, there's a lot. If you think about it, it's the same thing I say with when I'm teaching about Alexander the Great, for example. Alexander the Great dies in kind of a similar fashion. He gets overindulgence in a meal, and then his body simply shuts down. But Attila's body is not. I mean, he's ridden a horse for his entire life. He's been fighting for his entire life, the stress and everything else, and he's probably overindulged his entire life. So it may just be that his body just says, this is one too many, one too many wives, one too many beers, one too many whatever.
And they don't seem to blame her for it. There's
not at all.
There's no suspicion that this was kind of some sort of assassination or anything.
No.
And then my favorite part of the whole story of Attila is what happens then, which is this story that after they mourn him, there's this amazing outpouring of grief and all this, just whole big thing. But then they put together his coffins, and it's sort of a coffin in a coffin in a coffin in a coffin kind of thing. This one gold, that one silver, etc. Put it all together, truck it out, send a squad out with all this stuff, all these gems, all this extraordinary stuff, to send it out to a secret place to bury it. And then when the guys come back, you take care of the guys, so nobody knows where he's been.
Right. He's one of these ones that in fact, we're told that they diverted a river and buried him, and then put the river back on top of him. He must have been buried with a lot of treasure if they're going to that extent.
Never been found.
No, we don't even have any clue. I mean, they don't even know what river to look for, let alone the fact that rivers have changed courses over the centuries since too.
But this is definitely one of those big ones as far as what must it be like if we could find the tomb?
Yeah.
I mean, what would it be like? It's tantalizing.
It is tantalizing.
It's very tantalizing.
It's a guy buried in normal clothing with a wooden bowl. It'll be one of those things that we're thinking about.
But a lot of stuff around him.
It'll all be wood, that sort of. No, I think you're right. I think this is one of those treasure moments that. Well, we don't know. I mean, we have no idea what he's taken, but we know what was in some of these cities like Aquileia. So he's got to have had. The Huns must have been rich. They can't keep it together though. Afterwards, after he dies, he's got several sons. Never a good thing when you're a leader that's based on personal charisma and not necessarily a constitution that establishes who's going to run it next. And his sons try, but that within 2 years, the Huns are not anything as they had been before, and they start leaving. Some will remain in Hungary, giving it the name, giving it the weird language. Others will start going back the steppes, just for protection. I think there's some, reestablishment, because this is not the last time we're going to see the Hunnic peoples come to the West. But this death and ends the scourge of Europe at that point in time. It's too late to save the Western Empire. That's gone. But because there's stronger forces there, and they don't have a common enemy anymore, so they can go after the Romans as common enemies. But the story of Attila, man, one of those ones that wouldn't you love? You've written fiction. Wouldn't you like to write the story of Attila? Oh, I know what I'll get him. How about the sister of the emperor? Ask him.
Sister of the emperor. Just crazy.
Absolutely.
Anoria. Her story, that's what I would just want to like her story. How'd she come up with
Yeah,
that? And sort of what happened to her afterwards? Because we only have
we
sort
have
of
a,
vague impressions of what happens to her afterwards. Where there's some one line in something, and I can't remember where it is, but there's one line where somebody says something like she was no longer in danger.
well,
And you're like, what was the danger before that? Like, what are the details? And we just don't have them. It'd be cool
yeah,
to
I
know.
think
Well, they
that's
are. They're getting ready to
they
lock
are.
us out
They
here,
are.
man. They're
And
flash the lights.
next week we're doing questions and answers. We won't have anything like this, like a personality in Attila. Maybe we will. Maybe all our questions
Yeah.
will be, tell us what Edward III really was. Uh,
Right. Right. And that's correct. Yeah. Next time it's our second Q&A episode. It's Q&A with Kelly and Mike. So please do be sending in those questions. We already have a list. We got some good
Something
ones.
Peter sent us
Um,
while we're doing this. Did you notice that?
yeah, I saw those popping in. He's like, "Here's some more questions for you." Oh, okay.
And we thank you
So
all
yeah, we got
for
we got
sending us
some
questions.
questions. Yes. Yes. It's no fun to have to make up our own questions. So your questions are very much welcome. Please do keep sending them. And even if we don't get to yours in this coming episode, we'll get to it in a
Yeah.
future episode. Very excited. So look, as ever, a reminder, this podcast is sponsored by medievalist.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our individual books, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalist. And that's also probably the best place to drop us a line if you've got questions for the Q&A. So
Yeah.
there you go. Do
Yeah.
everything there.
We're getting spring. It's nice weather out there, but the barkeeps
Yeah.
want home. So I think we'll have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say so long for a few days. We'll be back.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
Bye.